Good evening. This is a workup of question number 17 from exercise 1 in unit 10 of Hansen and Quinn's intensive Greek course. Now, looking at this at face value, it definitely seems like a monster, but as we can see, this question is 2 sentences. We're going to draw a nice long dash in there. And one way that I like to use to help break up the sentence is really find any red flag words that indicate any other separations in the sentence. For example, this biggest one will be hoste, which is in sentence number 1. And hoste is usually indicative that either an actual or a natural result clause is about to occur in this particular sentence, but we'll get back to that later. We're going to notice a couple of other things like prepositions, which will help us link certain words together. In this case, we have aneu, which is a preposition that goes with the genitive. More on that later. We have eis. We have en. And then we also have a little something up here. But before we get to that, we're going to go ahead and find the verb in our very first sentence. Now, right off the bat, we do have 2 words right next to each other, which look suspiciously like verbs. They both are pulled from verbs. This first one is from the verb thuo, which means to sacrifice. And the second one is from the verb timao, which means to honor. Now, only one of these is our verb. And the best way to figure out which one is to really look at pieces inside the actual word itself, which will help us identify whether or not these are verbs or participles. Now, the very first thing I'm going to draw your attention to is the menos ending, in tetu menos. Now, this omicron iota sigma ending is usually indicative of a dative plural ending. I'm going to go ahead and circle that for you so you can see it right there. And then we have this men ending, which we usually see in passive participles, and as this verb is pulled from the 5th principal part of the verb thuo, I have reason to believe that this is a perfect passive or middle participle. In the dative plural, it also happens to be masculine. We're just going to go ahead and write that down right there. Let's go ahead and diagnose this other verby thing, which is from the verb timao, which means to honor. Now we have this wonderful new tau ending. We have our long I ending, and then we have this extended, really lengthened vowel. That's omega with a circumflex over it, and usually that's just an indicator that there's been some sort of contraction going on within the verb itself, which is true. Timao is one of the first contracted verbs you'll learn about in Hansen and Quinn. Now we're going to go ahead and notice too that this is also pulled from the first principal part, which means it is either present or imperfect. As we don't have a past indicative augment, which we would usually see for an imperfect, we're going to assume for now that this is a present subjunctive, passive, or middle verb. I'm going to go ahead and write that down here. PS stands for present subjunctive, passive / middle, 3rd person, plural. Now we have our 3rd person, which means that we're looking for someone in the 3rd party. And we can see that right here. We have ho theo, which is the gods in a nominative plural masculine form. I'm going to go ahead and underline that for you so you can see. And since we don't really see a direct object, I'm going to go ahead and give this verb a passive meaning. So the gods are being honored, and that's just what we have for now for the sentence. Now, if you'll notice, we have this wonderful little phrase right here, in which we have 2 definite dative plural articles in attributive positions. So the first one goes with the dative plural form of ikes, which is the word for goats. And then we have tois kind of connecting with this prepositional phrase here, and toi hairo. And this little phrase right here, starting with the highlighted portion, means in or on the shrine. And we have basically what this says right now without any verb or noun attached. It's the goats on the shrine. And since like I said before, we've noticed that this participle is also a dative plural, I'm going to go ahead and assume that this participle is going to go with this clause in some shape or form. Now that we have that settled, let's go ahead and get started on this other section right here. Now, like I said before, this hoste is usually an indicator that a natural or an actual result clause is in the process of forming. You'll remember that an actual clause will have a verb in the indicative in the second part, whereas a natural clause or natural result clause will have a verb in the infinitive in the second part of the sentence. This is very much not an infinitive. This is from the verb sodzo, which means to save, and it's in its first principal part, which means it must be present. In this case, it is a present active third person plural verb. I'm going to go ahead and put that down here. So we have PA, third person, plural. And since the only other thing we have in the sentence is an accusative, I'm going to assume that this third person plural refers back to these wonderful gods that we have in the first part of the sentence. And this, of course, Tein Polin, that is a standard accusative phrase, which means just the city. Nothing too fancy about that, folks. And we can see here that when we look at the translation, all of the pieces start to make sense. So we have the gods are being honored, and here you can see that wonderful passive translation of the verb timontai. And then here, although it's probably not technically correct, I've given this twice, I see a kind of a dative of instrumentality form here, since that's what most makes sense with our passive verb. So we have the gods are being honored with goats, which are being sacrificed, having been sacrificed, with goats being sacrificed on the shrine, so that, and that's just the short and dirty way of translating hoste, so that they, the gods again, would save the city. And hopefully that's clear to you all. If you have any questions about this first translation, go ahead and make a note down in the comments, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Without further ado, let's get started on the second half. So like I said before, we have prepositions with very specific pieces in the sentence. Aneo is a preposition which goes with the genitive. Thankfully, we have the noun, thusia, which is the noun for sacrifice, and we have it with a wonderful genitive plural ending. Really, the genitive plural is one of my favorites. And this word right here, you may assume that it is somehow associated with these two. I really wouldn't consider it to be. Gar is a postpositive, which means that it can never come first in its clause, which is just wonderful. I love postpositives. And really how we can roughly translate this first section right here is for without sacrifices. Okay, we're going to pause on that for a moment and go and try to find our verb in the second sentence. Now you can see immediately we have two things that kind of look like verbs. We have kalusi and nike santas. Now, nike santas has what we would call a nomenclature ending for a participle. It has that wonderful new tau, and then the accusative plural ending, which is in its third declension accusative plural form. And we can also see that this is a verb that we recently learned about in Hansen and Quinn, usually meaning to conquer or to be victorious. Let's go ahead and move back to our verb and put this little baby on hold for now. We have kalusi, which is from the verb kaleo. Kalo? No, I think it's kaleo. Yes, it is kaleo. And we can tell because this is a spurious diphthong that we have here with a circumflex over the upsilon. And really, either a spurious diphthong or a circumflex will be an indicator that the verb you're looking at has been contracted in some way. Kind of similar to this verb we have up here, this is a third person plural, present indicative active verb to call. I'm going to go ahead and put that down here. So PA, third person plural. Let's go ahead and take a look at this nominative thingy we have going on here. So we have hoi theoi, and then we have this thing that looks kind of like an adjective, which it is in this case. Ekthroi is the nominative masculine plural form of the adjective ektros, which means basically enemy or hostile. In this case, we're going to use the translation enemy. So what we have is the enemy gods are calling. Let's go ahead and find ourselves a direct object, and we can find that here with tous polymeos, which is the accusative masculine plural form of the word polemo. That's probably not right. But we have an accusative plural direct object, which is going to be the enemies. So the gods are calling the enemies. And as you can see, I'm not ignoring this little chi here. It's actually, because it's not linking anything together, with really what I mean linking anything together, we don't have two items that have different translations but have similar endings, and that they're either both nominative or both dative or both accusative, whatever. So in that case, when we don't have something that we can list together, we're going to give chi the translation of even or also. So For without sacrifices, even the enemy gods are calling the hostile ones. Let's go ahead and translate our first prepositional phrase in this sentence. It's eis tein gain. Now, gain is usually given the translation of earth, given that its cognate is Gaia, which is the basically Mother Earth, but who cares about that right now? It's 10 o'clock, I'm tired. Okay, so eis tein gain, which is into the land. We're going to go ahead and give it its secondary translation here. So even the enemy gods are calling the hostile ones into the land. And let's go ahead and return back to our participle here. Now you'll remember that I told you that this is a accusative plural ending. It's also a future indicative active. So we're going to put down F-I-A, accusative plural, and it is masculine. Now, what's the other thing that we have in the sentence that's accusative plural? You're right, it's this one right here. Gosh, I sound like Dora. Anyway, so we can assume because of the endings, both are accusative plural, that these two phrases are somehow linked together. So kind of the short and sweet of it is the hostile ones intending to conquer some way or in some shape or way. Then we have this little phrase right here, which is en nahe. Nahe is the word for battle, and en is just the preposition that goes with it. So even the enemy gods were calling the hostile ones into the land, intending to be victorious in battle. Of course, this is all contingent on the fact that these people haven't made sacrifices to the gods. Yeesh. Would not want to be a Greek during this time. Anyway, here is the finished translation that we have. We have the gods are being honored with goats being sacrificed on the shrine so that they would save the city. For without sacrifice, even the enemy gods are calling the hostile men into the land to be victorious in battle. There we go, guys. Hopefully that was really helpful for you all, and I really enjoyed making this.